The air crackled with anticipation. It was thick with humidity and hope. The Alamodome in San Antonio, Texas was a cauldron of noise. The 2025 National Championship game was about to begin. The Florida Gators were facing off against the Houston Cougars. It was a battle of styles, a clash of titans. The energy was palpable. The Florida Gators, with their storied history and rabid fan base, had a legacy to uphold. They had fought their way to the championship game with grit and determination. Their coach, a seasoned veteran, had instilled in them a belief that they could overcome any obstacle. Now they were just 40 minutes away from basketball immortality. The Houston Cougars, on the other hand, were a team possessed. They were led by a dynamic point guard who could score at will and dish out assists with precision. Their high-octane offense was a sight to behold. They had taken the tournament by storm, knocking off higher-seeded opponents with relative ease. The stage was set for an epic showdown. The lights dimmed, and the crowd roared as the starting lineups were announced. The energy in the arena was electric. This was more than just a game. This was a battle for supremacy. The Houston Cougars came out firing on all cylinders. Their point guard, a blur in his red and white uniform, was unstoppable. He weaved through the Gators' defense with ease. He found his teammates for open shots, and they knocked them down with confidence. The Cougars were playing with a swagger that was both impressive and intimidating. The Gators, on the other hand, looked out of sorts. Their shots weren't falling. Their defense, usually a strength, seemed a step slow. The Cougars' fast-paced offense was giving them fits. The lead began to balloon. 5 points quickly became 10, then 15. Florida's coach called a timeout to try and stop the bleeding. He urged his team to settle down. He reminded them of the game plan. He implored them to play with more intensity. The Gators huddled up, their faces etched with determination. They knew they had to turn things around quickly. Despite the timeout, Houston's momentum continued. Their offense was relentless, their defense was stifling. The Gators were hanging on by a thread. The crowd was in a frenzy. It seemed like a blowout was in the making. As the first half wore on, a sense of urgency gripped the Florida Gators. They needed a spark, a catalyst to ignite their dormant offense. Enter sophomore guard, Marcus Richard. Richard, a tenacious defender known for his hustle, had struggled offensively throughout the tournament, but on this night, he was destined to become a hero. It started with a steal. Richard, anticipating a pass, jumped the passing lane and raced down the court for a thunderous dunk. The crowd erupted. The Gators bench went wild. Richard, usually stoic, let out a primal scream. He had tasted blood, and he wanted more. Richard's defensive intensity seemed to ignite the entire Gators team. They began to pressure the ball more aggressively. They forced turnovers. They got out in transition. And Richard was in the middle of it all, making plays on both ends of the court. With each steal, each basket, each defensive stop, Richard chipped away at Houston's lead. His energy was infectious. His teammates fed off of his intensity. The momentum was slowly but surely shifting in Florida's favor. The final minutes of the first half were a blur of action. The Gators, fueled by Richard's heroics, were clawing their way back into the game. The crowd, sensing a shift in momentum, roared their approval. The noise inside the Alamodome was deafening. Florida's coach, sensing an opportunity, called a timeout to draw up a play. He wanted to end the half on a high note. He knew that momentum in basketball is a fickle thing. He needed his team to carry their energy into the locker room. The play worked to perfection. Florida's point guard drove to the basket and drew the defense. He then kicked the ball out to Richard, who was wide open in the corner. Richard calmly caught the ball, set his feet, and let it fly. The buzzer sounded as the ball swished through the net. The Gators went into the locker room, trailing by only 2 points. They had weathered the storm and were right back in the game. The momentum had shifted. The second half promised to be a battle for the ages.